Let me tell you something about hobbies that most productivity culture gets completely wrong. Having many interests is not a sign of scattered thinking or lack of focus. For some people, and I am one of them, it is a genuine survival strategy. I am almost 40 years old, and right now my life includes watching anime, following Korean dramas, reading manga, gardening, teaching ESL, and soon adding 2 kittens to a household that already has dogs. Before I started teaching online, my world was mostly American television series and books. The range expanded over time, not because I have no discipline, but because each new interest added another layer of engagement with life that chronic depression keeps trying to strip away. When I noticed that nothing interests me, not the anime I usually love, not the garden, not the drama I was looking forward to, that is how I know my depression has gotten bad. The number of things I care about is literally one of the tools I use to measure and manage my own mental state. So yes, having many interests matters. And no, it is not something to be embarrassed about. Let's talk about why some people, and Japanese people in particular, tend to look at someone with many hobbies and feel something between mild skepticism and quiet dismissal. Japanese culture has a deep and genuine respect for mastery. There is a widely held value in Japan around the idea of dedicating yourself completely to one path, refining a single skill or craft over a lifetime with patience, consistency, and total commitment. This value shows up everywhere, from the chef who has spent 40 years perfecting one type of dish, to the craftsperson who has dedicated their entire career to a single traditional art form, to the office worker who has been with the same company for 3 decades. In this cultural framework, depth is the measure of seriousness. Breadth, by contrast, can look like someone who has not yet decided what they are actually committed to, someone who is still trying things rather than mastering anything. This is why a Japanese person with many hobbies might not broadcast that fact. The socially safe presentation of yourself in Japan tends to involve presenting 1 or 2 clearly defined interests that you can speak about with some depth and credibility. Mentioning 10 different hobbies in casual conversation can give the impression of someone who is scattered, easily distracted, or not serious about any of them. It is not necessarily that the Japanese person genuinely believes having many interests is wrong. Many of them privately have broader curiosity than they show, but the social calculus around self-presentation tends to favor depth over breadth. Add to this the general reluctance that many Japanese people have around sharing personal information, including their real passions and hobbies, and you end up with a culture where people frequently present a curated, minimal version of their personal life rather than the full picture. The disadvantages of having many interests are real and worth being honest about. Time is finite, and attention is finite. When your curiosity pulls you in multiple directions simultaneously, there is a genuine risk of never going deep enough in any one area to build the kind of skill or knowledge that creates real value, professional, creative, or personal. You might start 20 projects and finish 3. You might know a little about many things and feel like an expert in none of them. You might find it harder to commit to long-term goals because the next interesting thing is always appearing on the horizon. For people who measure their self-worth through achievement and completion, this can be genuinely frustrating. The feeling of being perpetually in the middle of something rather than ever fully arriving somewhere is one of the less comfortable features of a wide-ranging curiosity. But for people managing chronic depression, the calculation changes significantly. Depression, at its most functional level, is the erosion of motivation and pleasure. It makes things that used to feel interesting feel flat. It makes starting anything feel like climbing a wall. When you only have 1 or 2 interests and depression takes the pleasure out of those things, you're left with nothing to reach for. When you have many interests, anime, dramas, books, gardening, pets, language learning, content creation, the odds that at least one of them will still generate enough spark to get you moving on a low day are considerably higher. It is not about being productive across all of them simultaneously. It is about having enough options that the door is never completely closed. One day gardening feels impossible, but an episode of something feels manageable. Another day reading feels too heavy, but spending time with the dogs is easy. The variety is the safety net. Now let's shift to Japan itself, because this video would not be complete without addressing something that surprises many foreigners who love Japanese culture from the outside: the gap between how Japan is perceived internationally and how Japanese society actually relates to foreign people within its borders. Japan is one of the most admired countries in the world among people who have never lived there. The food, the aesthetics, the pop culture, the precision of the infrastructure, the politeness of daily interactions, all of it is genuinely impressive, and the global fascination is understandable. But Japan is also one of the most ethnically homogeneous developed nations on the planet, and that homogeneity is not just a demographic fact. It is a social reality that affects how foreign residents and visitors are treated in ways that the tourism brochures and the anime fan communities do not usually mention. Japan has historically maintained a very strong sense of cultural and ethnic identity that prioritizes insider status in ways that are not always visible to short-term visitors, but become very apparent to people who live and work there over time. The concept of us and them, Japanese and non-Japanese, operates quietly but consistently across many social and institutional contexts. Foreign residents in Japan, regardless of how long they have lived there, how well they speak Japanese, or how thoroughly they have integrated into the community, often remain permanently in a category of otherness that Japanese-born people simply do not occupy. This is not always expressed through overt hostility. In fact, it is frequently expressed through the same surface politeness that characterizes all Japanese social interaction. But the politeness does not always reflect the underlying feeling, and the gap between the two is something that foreign residents learn to navigate over time. One of the more uncomfortable manifestations of this dynamic involves crime and suspicion. When something goes wrong in a Japanese community, a theft, an assault, a disturbance, the foreign resident or visitor in the vicinity is statistically more likely to be viewed with suspicion than a Japanese person in the same situation. This is a documented pattern, and it reflects a bias that exists in parts of Japanese society, the assumption that outsiders are more likely to be responsible for disruption or wrongdoing than insiders. Japanese media coverage of crime has historically tended to emphasize the foreign nationality of suspects when foreigners are involved in crimes in ways that reinforce this association in public perception, while crimes committed by Japanese nationals receive less emphasis on the perpetrator's background. For foreign people living in Japan, this means operating with an awareness that in certain situations, their foreignness itself becomes a data point that works against them before any other facts are considered. This does not mean Japan is uniquely hostile to foreigners compared to other countries. Biases against outsiders exist everywhere, and Japan is far from the most extreme example. But the particular combination of surface politeness and underlying social distance that characterizes much of Japanese interaction with foreigners creates a specific kind of experience that is worth understanding clearly before you arrive. You may be treated with perfect courtesy in every interaction and still find yourself subtly excluded from things that Japanese colleagues, neighbors, or acquaintances take for granted. The courtesy is real. The inclusion is conditional in ways that are rarely stated directly, but are consistently present. Generationally, this is changing slowly, but genuinely. Younger Japanese people, particularly those who grew up with the internet, with international pop culture, and with more exposure to global perspectives through media and travel, tend to be considerably more open to foreign people and foreign influence than older generations. The rise of global content consumption, the international popularity of Japanese pop culture, which has created reciprocal interest in other cultures, and the increasing presence of foreign workers in Japanese cities has shifted attitudes among younger demographics in measurable ways. But older generations, whose experience of Japan was formed in a more closed and homogeneous social environment, often retain stronger reservations about foreign presence and are less likely to express genuine openness even when they express surface politeness. For any foreigner planning to visit or live in Japan, the practical takeaway is simple. Understand the social environment you are entering with clear eyes rather than through the lens of how Japan appears from a distance. Be aware that you are operating in a context where your behavior reflects on all foreign people in the perception of people around you, fair or not. Be respectful of the rules, written and unwritten. Accept that some doors will remain closed not because of anything you have done but because of where you come from. And find the parts of Japan that genuinely are as wonderful as they look from the outside, because those parts are real too, and they are worth experiencing fully. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful or relatable, please subscribe to join my journey toward 2,000 videos. On this channel, I share unfiltered ESL stories, yes, even the toxic ones, alongside Japanese and Korean language tips, my plants, my pets, and the reality of solo living. If you'd like to support my work and help me build my retirement fund, you can buy a treat for my pets via the link in the description below. Every bit of support helps keep this channel independent and growing. See you in the next one.